While the front of the grid exploded in anger and frustration at Formula One's Hungarian Grand Prix, there was also trouble further back. Aston Martin have fallen by the wayside in this season's development race, leaving Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll fighting Haas, VCARB and Alpine for the final point-scoring positions. Despite having upgrades in Hungary, Aston Martin struggled again, but they weren't helped by a decision from the FIA that Alonso described as a gross error. To add to the two-time world champion's troubles, Lance Stroll decided to ignore team orders after Fernando had followed them, stealing the final point-scoring position from the Spaniard. Today, I'll check out the massive mistake the FIA made, and how Lance Stroll made an enemy of one of Formula One's best drivers. So don't go anywhere. Aston Martin have struggled for the last few months as a string of ineffective upgrades have left them in no man's land. It has been an almost identical season so far when compared to 2023. The car started strongly, looking capable of fighting the front runners, though not quite podium capable this time. But as the development race has ramped up and teams around them have brought upgrades, Aston Martin have been able to find the performance necessary to compete. Before, a good race would have been a push for a podium finish. Now they have to struggle for a single point. That struggle is causing tension in the team, which boiled over during Sunday's Grand Prix, but more on that shortly. To try and arrest the decline of their performance, Aston Martin brought some significant upgrades to Hungary. It centered around changes to the floor. The flat-shaped section in between the Venturi tunnels to which the plank is mounted changed in shape to induce a different pressure distribution to the diffuser. There were accompanying changes to the geometry of the tunnels, the floor edges and the floor fences to fully exploit that. The team's beam wing second element was also raised to make more aggressive use of the airflow exiting the diffuser. All of this was intended to work together to try and find more downforce without inducing much drag. That seemed to be working in qualifying as both cars made it into Q3, but they still appear to be lacking the lap time to contend with the Ferraris, McLarens, Hamilton and Verstappen. However, Alonso did appear to be on his way to setting a lap which would have been better than P7, his eventual finishing position when Yuki Tsunoda crashed. Yuki crashed at the exit of Turn 5 during the closing stages of Q3, with just 2 minutes and 23 seconds remaining in the session. The heavy crash, caused by a dangerous section of runoff, was one of the biggest in F1 history when measuring G-force experienced by the driver. The 68 Gs Yuki experienced was the 8th highest of an F1 driver, more than Max Verstappen's Silverstone crash in 2021 and Romain Grosjean's crash in Bahrain in 2020. The crash completely destroyed Yuki's car, but thanks to modern F1 safety standards, he was able to walk away and race to a points finish in the Grand Prix the next day. It took just over 10 seconds after his crash for the session to be red flagged. The decision to red flag the session, rather than wave double yellows in the sector the crash occurred in, meant that no driver got the chance to finish their lap, even if they were past the incident when it happened. This infuriated Fernando Alonso, as he was on a quicker lap and past the incident when it happened. The situation was especially hard for Alonso to accept because of what he claims is a verbal agreement among teams and the FIA that if cars run off track early in a lap, then double yellows will be waved rather than a red flag. This means any cars that have not come across the incident will have to abort their laps, but it does not penalize drivers who are long past the incident. Speaking to the media after the session, Alonso said, "In Q3, the FIA sometimes gets it right and sometimes makes gross errors. Today they made one, because they red flagged when I was in the last corner, which is surprising. When there is an accident in Turn 8, but he meant Turn 5, they normally wait for the cars to complete their laps, or that's the spoken rule." The FIA weren't done infuriating the prickly driver though. With the red flag waving, the FIA decided to place all cars into parc fermé, even though there were 2.5 minutes of the session left. Alonso was mostly out of his car when the officials told him to get back in and drive to his pit box instead. Apparently, the FIA had initially decided to end the session, but changed their minds after realizing that Tsunoda's car was easy to recover and that the barriers only needed minimal repairs after his crash. Going into the pit lane, Lance and I were put into parc fermé, Alonso said. They closed the pit lane and put us into parc fermé. We got out of the car, then they told us that Q3 was going to restart. We got back in the car, they buckled us in, and because I had no more tyres, I didn't go out again. Alonso's frustration at how the session was handled was clear to see. As he was getting weighed, he was spotted throwing his hat and jacket to the ground as he vented his frustration to George Russell and an FIA official. That wasn't the end of Alonso's infuriating weekend though. An overlooked team orders row in the Hungarian Grand Prix played out very differently to the one which decided the outcome of the race. While Lando Norris begrudgingly accepted McLaren's instruction to let his teammate past, Lance Stroll refused to do the same at Aston Martin. With everything that was happening at the front of the race, the battle for 9th and 10th position was easily overlooked. With 6 laps to go, Aston Martin told Fernando Alonso to let Stroll pass into 10th place, the final points-paying position. Stroll had made his last pit stop later than Alonso and was on fresher tyres, and Aston Martin wanted to give him the opportunity to attack Yuki Tsunoda, who is 3.5 seconds ahead of them. It isn't an uncommon move in Formula 1, one both drivers are very familiar with. Alonso's race engineer, Chris Cronin, gave him warning of the team's plan. "Fernando, we've got one more lap to close up on Tsunoda," he said with 8 laps to go. "But if not, we're going to give Lance a chance." Alonso wasn't making any inroads on the VCARB driver as Aston Martin pulled the trigger and gave Lance a chance at the overtake. "We will swap back," Cronin said, after they changed places. "If he doesn't get him, we will swap back." Stroll was given similar messages at the same time. "Fernando will give you DRS, we'll go past him into turn 1, and then we need to get Tsunoda," his race engineer Andrew Vizard told him. "Everything to get Tsunoda now, otherwise we'll swap back at the end of the race," he added. However, from the outset, Stroll indicated his dissatisfaction with the instruction. "I would have passed Fernando, but okay," he replied. Although Stroll took over half a second per lap out of Tsunoda, his chances of passing the VCARB looked slim. Before the race, it was predicted that drivers would have to be a second a lap faster than the car ahead of them to make an overtake. In reality, it was closer to 2 seconds a lap difference that was needed to make an overtake. Not realizing how big a lap time advantage was needed to make an overtake was what led to Red Bull giving Max Verstappen a suboptimal strategy and all the radio messages that came with that. As the laps ticked down, Lance managed to get close to Tsunoda but never had the pace to actually make a pass. As he entered the final sector on the final lap, Lance's race engineer reminded him to give the place up. "Lance, if you don't get him now, you need to switch back before the line," he said. "Fernando is 4 seconds behind you, there's no pressure behind." There was no response from Lance, so Vizard tried again. "Lance, suggest you drop back. Let Fernando past. He's 4 seconds back." Stroll again gave no reply and crossed the line in 10th position, taking the final points position which Fernando had given him a few laps earlier. Alonso also appeared to assist Stroll early in the race after both started on soft tyres. Alonso ran ahead of his teammate in the first stint and appeared on lap 7, while Stroll stayed out until lap 13, longer than anyone who began the race on softs. Alexander Albon said that Aston Martin used Alonso at that point to delay other drivers who had pitted early and help Stroll. "Fernando was playing a good team game," said Albon after the race. "He bunched up the whole group to allow Lance to come to pit and extend his stint." Neither driver commented on the team orders after the race, but it was a weekend that left Alonso incredibly frustrated. Alonso said after the race that his team had made the wrong decision with their strategy. "A bit surprised when we stopped in lap 7 because we talked this morning. Our car is hard on tyres normally, so if you stop in lap 7, there are 63 laps to do with 1 medium, 1 hard, so it was a challenge from that point. We didn't have the pace, our strategy didn't help. We spoke this morning, we have to even a little bit the stints. If not, there is a high price to pay if you do a very long stint with 1 set of tyres. They called me to box in lap 7 or lap 8. I knew that the race was over." He was heard over the team radio after his first pit stop saying that he didn't care about what the other cars around him were doing with their race strategy because they were already losing the race with everybody due to the poor decision-making of the team. Do you think Alonso was right to be angry at the FIA after qualifying? And what do you think of Lance Stroll ignoring team orders and taking 10th place from his teammate? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.